All right, so today we're diving into a story, kind of like Romeo and Juliet, but, it has a poetic twist. And it takes place in the Arabian desert. We're going to be looking at Layla and Majnun
Oh, yeah.
by Nizami.
Nizami, yeah.
It's a classic tale of love and loss and societal pressures.
I think it's fascinating how this epic poem, I mean, it goes way beyond a simple love story. It really kind of digs into this clash between, like, passionate individualism
Yeah.
and what society expects.
No.
And it makes us wonder, like, what it means to be truly madly in love.
Yeah. And we've got a translation of Layla and Majnun ready to go. We're going to explore how this story uses poetry to express those intense feelings and maybe even transcend the human experience a little bit.
Exactly. And, remember, like, this poem acts as a window into the values and social norms of its time.
Yeah.
So as we go through the story, I want you to think about how that society defines madness and what happens when somebody dares to challenge those definitions.
So the story starts. It starts with Qays, born to wealthy, loving parents, after years of them longing for a child.
You know that detail about the parents longing?
Yeah.
It's not just background. It really kind of sets Qays up as almost like this destined figure, right? Someone precious. He's described as brilliant, charming, handsome, basically the ideal golden boy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but then he meets Layla in school and boom, it's not just like a crush or something. The poem portrays it as this deep, instant, soul-connecting kind of love.
Yeah, they describe it as like a force of nature.
Right.
It just overwhelms him.
Yeah.
And so naturally, this love becomes public knowledge,
Right.
which leads to all sorts of societal pressure, disapproval. Ultimately, they're forced apart.
Yeah, and that's where things get really, really interesting. Kay's heartbreak is so intense that he becomes known as Majnun, meaning madman.
And that's such a pivotal moment in the story because his love, which already kind of went against societal norms, now earns him a label that carries real consequences. Right? Like, Ajnan isn't just a cute nickname. It's how society marks him as different, as almost a way to distance themselves from his kind of unconventional behavior.
So his madness, starts to manifest in different ways. He wanders the desert, neglecting his appearance, neglecting his social duties, and just pours all his emotions into these incredibly passionate poems.
Yeah.
Dedicated to Layla.
We see this stark contrast between the Qays who had so much promise, right, the golden boy,
Yeah.
and the outcast he becomes. Like, his brilliance is almost totally overshadowed by this all-consuming love. And it begs the question, is he genuinely mad, or is he just experiencing love on a level that society just can't handle?
Right. And his family definitely tries to cure him. His father tries to reason with him, even sends him on a pilgrimage to Mecca, hoping for some, divine intervention.
But what's striking is that even at the Kaaba, the holiest site in Islam, Majnun's prayer isn't for his love to fade, right? He actually prays for his love for Layla to grow stronger. So this shows just how deep his devotion is, how it goes beyond what's normally expected.
It's like his love for Layla has become his new religion. Then there are the attempts to cure him through battle, which is a whole nother layer to this story.
Exactly. Majnun's friend, Prince Naufal, tries to win Layla's hand for him, not once but twice. And Majnun's reaction is fascinating. He desperately wants to be with Layla, but he refuses to have her won through violence.
Right.
There's this deep internal conflict that he's wrestling with.
Now, it's important to remember that Layla isn't just sitting around, passively waiting to be rescued.
Right, absolutely. Layla is trapped in a society that doesn't give her much agency.
Right.
And she's forced to suffer in silence.
Yeah.
And eventually she's forced into a marriage.
Right.
With Ibn Salam, a wealthy and respected man. This only makes her despair worse.
It's heartbreaking because we know how much she loves Majnun, and she's clearly not a weak character. I mean, she's got spirit, intelligence. She even finds ways to connect with Majnun despite their separation.
Right. Think about that scene in the garden.
Yeah.
Where Layla goes, seeking solace, hoping to feel some connection to Majnun. It's like she's trying to commune with him through nature, the one place where their love can exist freely.
And then someone walks by singing Majnun's poetry. It's such a powerful moment showing how connected they are even when they can't be together.
Right, and it emphasizes, that scene emphasizes the power of Majnun's poetry. Like, it's not just this personal outpouring of his feelings. It's become something that affects other people. It's spreading outward, and it's keeping Layla's hope alive.
But it also adds to the tragedy, right? Because Layla's emotional reaction to the poetry is witnessed by her friend.
Yes.
Which gets back to her mother.
Right. And that creates a whole new problem for Layla's family, because now they're scared of Majnun's influence on her. They're worried that that she'll be branded as mad too if their connection gets out. So they try even harder to keep them apart.
It's just a terrible situation for Layla, because if she goes against what society expects, she'll be labeled mad, ostracized. But if she follows the rules, she's stuck in a loveless marriage, living this life without love.
And that's where the poem's critique of society's hypocrisy really hits hard.
Yeah.
Because Majnun is called mad for his intense love, but that same society forces Layla into a marriage based purely on, social and economic convenience, ignoring her feelings completely. So who's truly mad in this situation?
Yeah, it really makes you think about how we, label and categorize people today, and what actions are seen as unacceptable and why.
Exactly. And what are the consequences for people who don't fit neatly into those boxes, right? I mean, Layla and Majnun is a timeless story because those questions are still relevant today.
And speaking of challenging norms, we can't forget the stories within the story.
Oh.
There's that one that Majnun's uncle Salim tells about a king and a dervish.
Right, where the king throws anyone who displeases him to these ferocious dogs, and then there's the wise courtier who actually befriends the dogs to save himself. And so these stories woven into the main narrative offer these parallels to Majnun's situation, and they really make us question, who is truly mad or wise.
Yeah. Is the poem suggesting that Majnun's behavior, even though it's so unconventional, might actually be a form of deeper wisdom?
Yeah, it's definitely open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Right? The poem is always playing with our expectations, encouraging us to look beyond appearances and question, the very definitions of madness and sanity. Remember, we're seeing the world through Majnun's eyes, which might give us this unique perspective on love, on freedom, on how limiting those social norms can be.
That makes me wonder about the desert itself. It's more than just a setting in this story, isn't it?
Absolutely. For Majnun, the desert becomes like a sanctuary, right?
Right.
A place where he can express his love for Layla without society's restrictions. But it also mirrors his inner turmoil, right? The desert's harshness reflects the intensity of his emotions.
And there's that striking detail about Majnun forming bonds with wild animals.
Right? Like lions, antelopes, wolves, they all gather around him peacefully.
Yeah.
It's like he's rejecting human society and connecting with something primal, something that goes beyond social norms.
Yeah, maybe in his madness, Majnun has tapped into this deeper understanding of nature.
Right.
That those who conform just can't grasp.
It's possible. What's even more interesting is how the poem uses these embedded tales, like the one with the king and the dervish, to subtly kind of challenge those societal norms.
Yeah.
It encourages us to reconsider our own assumptions about what's considered normal.
Yeah.
And who gets to decide that.
Yeah, it's incredible how this story, written centuries ago, can still make us think about our own lives and the pressures that we face. But before we get too deep into that, I think it's time to talk about Layla's forced marriage and how that throws everything into even more turmoil.
Right.
Ready to dive into that.
Let's do it. This is where the story takes an even more heartbreaking turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we left off with Layla being forced into this marriage with Ibn Salam. Talk about adding fuel to the fire of Majnun's so-called madness.
It's a huge turning point in the story, right?
Yeah.
Layla's marriage, I mean, it symbolizes this ultimate victory of societal norms over personal desire. Like it shatters any hope that Majnun had of ever being with Layla in a way that their society would accept.
And it's not like Layla's happy about it either. I mean, she's essentially imprisoned in her own home, forced to live this lie. It's incredibly frustrating to see, especially knowing how deeply she loves Majnun.
Yeah, and her situation really, I think, highlights how little power women had in that society.
Yeah, right.
Layla's treated like property, basically,
Yeah.
Just a pawn in this social game that's played by men. Her own voice, her own desires, I mean, they're completely silenced.
But we know Layla isn't just some passive character. I mean, she's strong, intelligent. She even finds ways to connect with Majnun, even though they're kept apart.
Exactly. Remember that scene where Layla goes to the garden, seeking solace?
Yeah.
It's almost like she's trying to connect with Majnun's spirit through nature, the only space where their love can exist freely.
And then, just by pure chance, someone walks by singing Majnun's poetry. It's such a poignant moment, showing how their love transcends physical distance.
And that chance encounter, it also underscores just how powerful Majnun's poetry has become. Like it's not just personal expression anymore.
Right.
It's out in the world, touching other people's lives. And it gives Layla hope.
But it also creates more problems, doesn't it? Layla's friend sees her emotional reaction to the poetry.
Yeah.
And that gets back to her mother.
Right. Now Layla's family's in a panic.
Right.
They're terrified that she'll be labeled mad like Majnun if their connection becomes known. So they double down on their efforts to separate them.
So Layla's like stuck in this impossible situation. If she defies those societal expectations, she'll be ostracized. But if she follows the rules, she's doomed to a life without love.
And here I think we see the poem really critiquing the hypocrisy of that society.
Yeah.
Because Majnun is considered mad for his passionate love. But that same society forces Layla into this marriage without any regard for her feelings, purely for, social and economic gain.
Yeah.
It really makes you think, like, who's truly mad in this situation?
Yeah, it's a question that resonates even today, doesn't it? How much do social pressures influence our choices, even when those choices go against what our hearts truly desire?
That's a question worth pondering for sure. And as we delve deeper into Layla and Majnun, I think it's important to keep in mind this tension between individual desires and societal expectations. It's a theme that runs throughout the entire story.
Speaking of adding complications, Prince Naufal returns to the scene. What motivates his actions at this point in the story?
Well, remember, Naufal feels a sense of responsibility toward Majnun, right? He'd promised to help him win Layla's hand. So he decides to try again, this time resorting to force.
So he gathers this massive army and launches a full-scale war against Layla's tribe. It seems like a pretty extreme reaction, even considering his loyalty to Majnun.
It is. And Majnun's reaction to Naufal's actions is even more surprising. He actually refuses to fight.
Really?
And sides with Layla's tribe. He would rather die than see Layla won through violence, even if it means, losing her forever.
That's a powerful statement about, how selfless his love really is.
Absolutely.
It's not about possessing Layla or conquering her or anything like that. It's about respecting her freedom, even if it means sacrificing his own happiness.
But his decision, it further isolates him from society. He's betrayed his friend, his tribe, all for a love that's, deemed impossible. And it really reinforces that idea that he's outside the bounds of what's considered, acceptable behavior.
It's just a heartbreaking situation all around. Now, Marfus is devastated. The war ends in a stalemate. And Layla's father uses this opportunity to make his position absolutely clear. Layla will never be with Majnun.
He even goes so far as to call Majnun a devil in human form, a wretch, a traitor poet. I mean, his words really demonstrate that deep social divide between Majnun and Layla.
And it seems like every attempt to bring them together only pushes them further apart. And all this rejection just sends Majnun spiraling even deeper into isolation.
Yeah, he goes further into the desert, finding solace only with the animals who seem to understand him, better than any human.
Yeah, and this bond that Majnun forms with the animals, I mean, it becomes such a powerful symbol of his spiritual journey. He's moved beyond the limitations of human society, finding connection and peace in the natural world.
Right.
It makes you wonder, is Majnun's madness a kind of heightened awareness?
Yes, it's an interesting thought.
He seems to have this connection to nature that others just don't.
Right, and the poem is constantly challenging us to question what we consider, normal.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that sometimes, those who are labeled as different or mad, they might actually have this unique perspective that we can learn from.
And Layla is caught in this tug of war between her own desires and what her society dictates.
Yeah.
She's trying to stay true to herself, to her love for Majnun, but she's also bound by, the rules of her family and her culture.
Exactly. She's forced to play this role she doesn't want, to live this lie that is slowly crushing her spirit. And it's a different kind of suffering than what Majnun experiences.
Yeah.
But it's just as real and just as heartbreaking.
It's a powerful contrast. It makes me wonder, is there even a right way to deal with those societal pressures? Is Majnun's outward rebellion any more authentic than Layla's kind of quiet suffering?
It's a tough question, and the poem it doesn't offer any easy answers. It simply presents their parallel journeys and lets us contemplate the different ways we navigate these complexities of love, societal expectations, and the search for personal freedom.
Yeah, it's definitely a story that stays with you. It makes you think about those subtle ways that we're all shaped by society and how how we balance our own desires with the expectations of others. But before we wrap up, we need to talk about the devastating losses that both Layla and Majnun experience.
That's right. That's right. The final act of this story is it's filled with grief, with loss, and the weight of their impossible love. It's a really powerful exploration of how those societal forces can impact even the most profound human emotions.
As we get to the final part of Layla and Majnun, both characters are dealing with like so much loss and grief, and the weight of their love, their impossible love, just becomes even heavier.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's remarkable how the poem uses their individual suffering to emphasize like just how limited their society is.
Yeah, right.
Their love, which is depicted as this pure and transcendent thing, is constantly being crushed by these rigid rules,
right,
expectations of their world.
The deaths of their parents really, really drive that point home. I mean, Majnun's father, Saeed, spends his final days trying desperately to bring his son back from what, society calls madness, but he ultimately fails.
Yeah, Saeed's death is especially tragic because it shows how even reason and parental authority, right, fail to understand or contain Majnun's love. Like even his own father, who loves them deeply, can't bridge the gap.
Right.
Created by those societal expectations.
And Layla is forced to watch her husband, Ibn Salam, waste away, consumed by jealousy, knowing he can never truly have her heart. It's just such a layered tragedy.
Yeah, and Ibn Salam's decline is another way that the poem, I think, critiques that society's values.
Right.
Because he's a victim of that same system that forced Layla into this loveless marriage. He has wealth, status, a beautiful wife, all the outward signs of success, but he's denied the one thing he truly desires, Layla's love.
Yeah, it's like the poem is saying that true love just can't survive in a system that's so focused on these rigid social structures.
Right.
It needs freedom, authenticity, a willingness to defy convention.
Exactly. And we see that reflected in Majnun's increasing isolation. He retreats further into the wilderness,
right,
finding comfort and companionship only with the wild animals who accept him unconditionally.
And that bond with the animals, I mean, it's so symbolic. It's as if in his madness, Majnun has transcended those limits of human society and tapped into this deeper understanding of nature,
right,
and existence, something that those bound by social rules just can't grasp.
Right. It flips that typical power dynamic.
Right.
Like Majnun, the outcast, the so-called madman, almost becomes like this shaman, right, able to connect with these creatures that represent those untamed aspects of nature.
Yeah, and even though he's physically isolated, his poetry still finds its way to Layla, providing her like a lifeline in her own emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
It speaks to the enduring power of art to connect hearts, across those physical and social boundaries.
And their connection is so beautifully illustrated when Layla receives this secret message from Majnun,
right,
delivered by a traveler who takes pity on them. The message describes Layla's beauty and suffering, and it rekindles this flicker of hope in her heart.
And she responds in kind, right? Sending Majnun a message of her own, hidden in a letter. She expresses her unwavering love and her faith in their bond.
Yeah, these letters become physical representations of their enduring love, right? They defy those barriers that keep them apart, and they're small but powerful symbols of hope in a world that seems determined to keep them separate.
But then tragedy strikes again with the death of Layla's husband. Even though she never loved Ibn Salam, his passing marks the end of any chance that she had, for a normal life.
Yeah, and her grief is so complex. She mourns the loss of a man who despite their circumstances, treated her with kindness. But she's also mourning the loss of her own freedom.
Right.
Knowing that society will never allow her to be with Majnun.
And this sense of hopelessness leads Layla to make a powerful decision. She asks her mother to dress her in a blood red gown, the color of martyrdom.
Wow.
And to bury her in it when she dies.
That request is so symbolic. It's like a rejection of the traditional white burial shroud. It's a defiant act. It says that her love for Majnun is worth dying for. She's choosing to become this this martyr for love, a testament to the power of passion in a world ruled by reason and social constraints.
And just as she predicted, Majnun does come to her grave,
Yeah.
pouring out his grief and longing in this truly, truly heart-wrenching scene.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And tragic. It's a testament to his devotion, right?
Right.
It highlights that depth of his love, but it also emphasizes how their passion was ultimately, thwarted by the societal barriers.
And the story ends with Majnun dying at Layla's grave. His soul finally reunited with hers in death. It's a bittersweet ending, one that emphasizes that transcendent nature of their love, but it also leaves us with a sense of sadness and loss.
Yeah, and what's so powerful about this ending is that it leaves us with so much to contemplate, right? Like, was Majnun truly mad? Or was he just a man who dared to love so deeply and intensely that his society just couldn't understand him?
And what about Layla? Was she simply a victim of circumstance, or did she in her own way resist those societal pressures through her unwavering love for Majnun?
Those are questions that don't have easy answers. I mean, the poem doesn't give us this, simple moral or message. Instead, it offers us this complex and nuanced look at love, at loss,
Yeah.
and the fight for individual freedom in a world that often tries to control us and confine us.
Yeah. It's a story that's stayed with me long after reading it. It's made me think about how we define madness and sanity in our own society, and it's made me appreciate the courage that it takes to love fiercely and authentically, even when the world is telling you it's impossible.
And as we wrap up this deep dive into Layla and Majnun, I want to leave you with this: if their love was considered madness in their time, what does that say about the limitations of their society, and what might it say about ours?
Yeah, that's a powerful question to consider. Thank you for joining us on this emotional and intellectual journey. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic that will spark your curiosity and challenge your thinking. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.